Hey guys, how's it going? So, they just showed off the Fullmetal Alchemist collab, the DN skin, and ML Pavel all tonight. And, gotta say, there was actually some pretty cool stuff. The units are definitely really interesting, and, it's been a while since we had a live stream that I thought was actually pretty hype, but I thought this one was really cool. Let's just get right into it though. So, Edward Elric is the first unit that they showed, and his base stats are incredibly good. So he's an HP scaling unit that has incredibly high base health, great speed, great defense, and he's a crit chance imprint. So you can just start with like 32%. That's already pretty amazing. Just those base stats are alone are huge. And he's an Ares warrior. I believe he's the only one in the game actually. This first skill is incredibly powerful. I would almost consider him to be sort of like the next Rimuru type character, where you read their skill set and they don't sound like they just do anything absolutely crazy, but then in practice they might be really, really powerful. Even though he's not as cool as somebody like Roy, I think that he has some really strong abilities. This one pretty much acts as a Crimson Seed, where you get to dispel a debuff every single turn from yourself, and when it happens, you do damage to their team, inflict a random debuff after stripping. And the debuffs are big, right? Decreased attack, decreased hit chance, provoke, silence. Provoke and silence can that can win a whole match, actually. So he's almost like a Caesarado, but way stronger. And also, it works on counters and stuff too. This isn't a counter attack. If he's hit by Spectre Tenebra and poison, for instance, he will use it. Or if he's counterattacked, that's really strong. That makes him an incredibly dangerous character, especially against cleaver aggro teams. Because if you would put a debuff on him, he could just completely cripple your team or make you instantly lose the match. And in standard matches, this is even still strong, and even against stuff like Belian, for instance, she puts on debuffs with her second hit of her S1 or S3, and he's going to do his counterattack. Honestly, kind of an absurd ability. It's pretty overloaded, I feel like, with how much it does. It's one of the main reasons why he seems really good to me. And with his S3, it's an ability that the CR push is great, and it ignores damage sharing, which is really nice. And also, it stacks up its damage every time you use it, and you can soul burn to reduce the cooldown. So that means in slower matches, he's still able to ramp up the damage and do stuff, even if people are ignoring him and not putting debuffs on him. He's still able to actually do a nice amount of damage and ramp up through a slower fight. That's really good. It makes it so that he's not a character that just sits there if your opponent doesn't have any debuffs that they're hitting him with. So he's actually still useful throughout the fight, and they kind of want to get rid of him because maybe he's ramping up and he'll do a lot of damage. We don't have the numbers yet. That seems pretty solid. Then we have his S1 here. It's pretty simple. It gives him a barrier, but since he's a health scaling bruiser, that barrier is actually going to be pretty nice. Throughout a fight, it might mitigate a lot of damage and make it kind of harder to deal with him. So I think that's actually pretty useful. Nothing too crazy, but it seems pretty nice. And then his artifact. So this artifact is actually kind of crazy. So it gives you 8% crit damage and 8% speed per stack up to 4 times, right? That ends at 32% crit damage and 32% speed, which is kind of insane. You have to do an extra attack, and the only characters that really come to mind instantly are like Alencia and Edward. So I think it could actually be a pretty good artifact on them. It's definitely one of those ones that seems like it would be relatively future-proof too. Half the characters they make are warriors, so fair enough, you know, it might be pretty useful overall. I'm definitely going to pick up at least one copy of this minimum, and if I start using a bunch, maybe I'd actually use bottles to max it out. Okay, next character. The Flame Alchemist Roy Mustang. So he has the same stats as Ludwig and Melissa, big damage, attack imprint, not nearly as good as crit chance, but whatever. And he's just all about pure attack and damage, but has no burns. His S2 is he takes half damage if there was an attack that would one-shot him, I guess. So that's kind of nice, makes it so that you can't take him out in one hit. They have this cool little lore thing where Roy is completely useless when it's raining and stuff out, so if he gets hit by an ice elemental enemy, he loses his Flame Alchemist ability. Kind of fun little thing. And the attack boost and hit chance, that's actually really nice on a character that's just all about big damage and trying to nuke things. Scorching Heat, it's great he has an S3 that just gives him attack buff before it's used. Means you don't need to buff him with something like that. He's pretty self-sufficient since he has attack buff and the extra 20%. Keep in mind, consumes 80 fighting spirit, and he only starts with, I believe, 40. Yeah. And so he can't use it right away. He can't use it turn 1. He's a mage, so you can run book on him, and his S1 gives him 30 fighting spirit, which means you would need to use an S1 burn on him, and then another soul burn from another character with book to be able to instantly be able to S3 right after. Kind of interesting. I wonder if it means that you would use him almost in some sort of bruiser team, but his stats mean that he seems like a cleave unit or a really aggro unit. Very odd overall. Might be able to try him a few different ways. Maybe you can build him really tanky and he just hits so hard that it doesn't matter. We'll have to see. But this probably hits like a truck, and it gives you Flame Alchemist again in case you lost it. And the fewer enemies, more damage. Just a big nuke overall. Great animation too. As for his S1, gives combat readiness and does a good amount of damage. If you have Flame Alchemist, then it penetrates 50% defense, which is really good. So his soul burn is actually looking pretty strong. If you're able to actually get 2 soul burns into the S3, it might just completely wipe most of their team. So overall, I think he's not as good as Edward. I think Edward seems almost like a must-pull kind of unit just based off their skill set. As for Roy, very cool, but he might be a little bit awkward to use and might not quite be as powerful. Let's move on. He also comes out 1 week after Edward. His artifact, it's kind of nice. Like 20% hit chance and 14% attack is decent. It's sort of like a weird mage symbol of unity, but it doesn't really seem crazy powerful to me. I think it's a nice one, but it's one of those artifacts you would have to max out to really get the full hit chance and attack. It's like a whale artifact. How many mages are going to use that over book? You really have to consider all these things. And overall, doesn't seem like one of those crazy must-pull ones, but I try to get every single limited artifact off of the powder shop, just in case, because you never know when it might get buffed, or, well, maybe not a collab artifact get buffed, but maybe a unit really wants to use it. I think it's worthwhile just trying to get as many of them as you can, though. Now, let's look at the last unit, Riza Hawkeye. So Riza is the free unit, and she's probably one of the only free units we've gone recently that actually seems kind of decent. So her stats are unique, I believe. I don't think there's another 5-star Ranger Capricorn. And she has crit chance improved, which is awesome because she's a free unit, which means you get all the copies. So she's just at 32% crit. That's great. At first I thought, okay, well, she's going to be a Wyvern unit, right? S2 is very interesting. It just reduces the amount of damage that the front unit takes by 30%, which is awesome by all single attacks. And if they're at 50% health or lower after being attacked in the front line, then dispels all debuffs from her and that ally, and then gives her Hawk's Eye for 2 turns, which is pretty nice. And you know, there's a long cooldown on the Hawk's Eye. I guess this is supposed to be part of her lore, right? Where she's always behind Roy and protecting him and helping somebody else. So I guess he's supposed to be in front and she's supposed to be behind. Kind of a cool lore thing. Hawk's Eye just gives her 30% speed, 30% crit damage. That's pretty nice. That's actually a really good boost overall. Press 3 dispels all buffs, decreases combat readiness by 50% of the target, and grants immunity for 2 turns while exploiting weak points once to the caster and the ally. So this is kind of a new thing where they just do 20% more damage, her and the ally in front. So that's actually kind of a cool boost. If you have a huge damage ability, 20% damage is nothing to be trifled with, right? And if you soul burn it, ignores effect resist, but you're probably not going to be doing that all that often. So this skill seems kind of decent, but it doesn't really stun them or stop them or anything. It pushes them back, but if it's a unit you can't deal with right away after, you could be in a little bit of trouble. And since she's not insanely fast, she's probably not going to be taking like the first turn to do that, right? For S1, sorry for the flashbang, yeah, it pushes the ally in front up, which is kind of cool. So she's basically like a reverse T-Crosset, where she gives the damage reduction to the ally in the front instead of the back, and she does a bunch of damage support stuff rather than defensive stuff. Kind of a cool idea, I think, overall. And for a free unit, I think it's really interesting. I think in Wyvern also, I guess it makes it so your tank isn't really going to die. Makes it kind of simple, I suppose. She also has Target, which is nice, and if she has Hawk's Eye, you know, she gets the extra damage at speed. So just kind of useful to push them up if you happen to have that passive up. For Artifact, I don't really see many people using it. I don't really like that it's 70%. Even if it was 100%, I just don't really see this being used by many Rangers in the game. Effectiveness is kind of whatever, especially for most Rangers, and speed buff, not really as important as a lot of other artifacts, especially not something like Guiding Light. She might use Guiding Light, though. Next, let's talk about the ML. Commander Pavel. So He's probably one of the coolest characters in the game. You know, I'm just gonna have his S3 go. I think it's easily one of the coolest S3s in the entire game. I think it's so awesome. It's so edgy, but so cool. He just shows up and shoots you in the face. And then it cracks the screen to go back to the stage. So cool. He's a very unique character. So he's a light ranger here with Taurus. And he's 109 speed, not the fastest, but really amazing attack and crit chance. Like, incredible of those two stats. And the speed is enough for a damage dealer. So his passive is a really interesting ability. He starts with 60 fighting spirit, and every time one of your allies crits, even if it's an AoE, that counts as 1 crit for this. So you need 2 total crits, basically. 2 separate attacks that happen to crit for this to activate. Consumes it all to basically use regular Pavel's S2 and increase the attack of himself, and push him up by 50%. And it also can't be countered or anything like that too, which is a pretty big deal. That's important. So he pushes himself up, does some damage to their team. And then he has an S3 just execute kind of ability, where if his attack is greater than the target's attack, penetrates their defense up to 70%, which that's pretty huge. It's kind of like a mini Strays S3, and you also get to target who gets hit. So realistically, if you do 2 crits before he goes, and then he S2s and S3s, that's probably going to kill at least one thing minimum, right? And he softens up their whole team, doing a ton of damage. I think this means in cleave and aggro, he would see the most use. In standard, it might be a little bit too difficult, even if you use guiding light or something. You're probably not going to really soul burn this that much either, unless you for some reason made a bruiser build with him. Maybe it works. But what's important is since he gets pushed up 50% by his passive, he only needs like maybe 200 speed, and right there he gets pushed up insanely far. Kind of like a closer Charles type thing in a way. Some units that really are able to push him up easily, Faith's Litica for instance. Peyra could technically S2 into S1, especially if you are an L or something. Ran can't really do that, but he can always push up other allies that could crit, like let's say Cdom or something, into Pavel. There's a lot of possibilities for things you can do. Ironically, Pavel works best with ML Pavel because he S2, S3s, which pushes up ML Pavel, who uses his S2 and then his S3. So that's kind of cool interaction right there. I think he's going to be maybe kind of strong in cleave, but you have to really set him up is the important thing. He really needs a specific setup, which maybe it'll be a little hard in practice to actually utilize. But overall, it seems really powerful. Then his S1, let's see. Just decrease attack for 1 turn. Really basic. That's not really a point. Once you're using his S1, you've either won the match or lost at that point anyways. So, doesn't really make too much of a difference. All in all, though, he seems like a really cool unit. I'll be trying him out on release for sure, along with all of the Fullmetal Alchemist collab units. I guess in conclusion, what I would say is Edward, on first impression, sounds like a must-pull unit. I would absolutely pull him. He seems like he's going to be really powerful, unless his multipliers are just absolutely terrible. Roy seems like a cool unit, but I'm not really sure if he's all going to be that great in practice. As for Riza, she's probably the coolest of the free units that we've gotten, so I'm actually really happy about that. She actually looks usable, which is something you can't really say all that often for them. And as for Pavel, if you don't play Cleaver aggro, you probably aren't going to really want him that much. We currently have characters like FCC on the banner, which are decent to get. But if you're considering pulling him, maybe wait till the end of his banner just to see what's next. And we'll take a look at him when he comes out, though. So anyways, these are my first impressions on the units. Thanks a bunch for watching, and I hope to see you guys next time.